January 26, 1945. The bitter Alsatian wind cut through the snow-covered fields near Holtzwer like a frozen blade, carrying with it the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning metal. Second Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy crouched in the makeshift command post, his breath forming white clouds in the sub-zero air as he surveyed the treacherous landscape that would soon become his personal battlefield. The 19-year-old Texan had already seen more combat than most men twice his age. Standing barely 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing only 110 pounds, Murphy appeared more like a farm boy than America's most lethal soldier. Yet beneath his boyish exterior burned the soul of a warrior forged in the crucible of poverty and hardened by 18 months of relentless European warfare. Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, occupied precarious positions along the edge of the Bois de Reedweir. Murphy commanded approximately 40 battle-weary soldiers who had been ordered to hold this vital crossroads until reinforcements arrived. The promised relief was delayed, leaving them exposed and vulnerable in the frozen wasteland. As dawn broke over the snow-laden pine trees, an ominous rumbling echoed across the valley. Murphy raised his field glasses and felt his blood chill at the sight before him. 6 German panzer tanks emerged from a morning mist like mechanical beasts, their steel hulls gleaming menacingly in the pale sunlight. Behind them advanced an estimated 150 Wehrmacht infantrymen, their field-gray uniforms barely distinguishable against the winter landscape. The German force represented a full company-strength assault, meticulously planned to recapture the strategic position. Wehrmacht commanders had grown increasingly desperate as Allied forces pressed deeper into German territory. This counterattack represented their attempt to stem the tide of American advance through the Colmar Pocket. Murphy quickly assessed the hopeless situation. His undermanned company faced overwhelming odds in terrain that offered little natural defense. The flat, open ground provided no cover for his retreating men, while the approaching German armor could obliterate his positions with concentrated fire. Every tactical manual would have recommended immediate withdrawal to preserve his remaining forces. Through his field telephone, Murphy coordinated with artillery positions, hoping to delay the German advance long enough for his men to establish defensive positions. Further back, the crackling radio provided his only lifeline to friendly forces, though he knew no reinforcements could arrive in time to influence the battle's outcome. As the German tanks drew closer, their diesel engines roaring through the crystalline air, Murphy made the decision that would define his legacy. Rather than abandon the position entirely, he ordered his men to fall back to a secondary line while he remained at the forward observation post to direct artillery fire and coordinate the withdrawal. The panzers opened fire with devastating accuracy, their high-velocity rounds screaming overhead and detonating among the American positions. Explosions erupted throughout the defensive line, sending geysers of snow, dirt, and shrapnel skyward. The methodical German advance demonstrated the Wehrmacht's tactical superiority and overwhelming firepower advantage. This account draws from official U.S. Army records and the National World War II Museum's documented research on the Battle of Holtzwer. The German artillery barrage intensified as Murphy watched his carefully positioned defenses crumble under the relentless assault. Through the smoke and snow, he could see his soldiers scrambling toward the rear positions, their faces etched with the grim determination of men who understood they were fighting for survival against impossible odds. Murphy remained at his exposed command post, his M1 carbine ready as he continued directing artillery strikes through his field radio. The static field communications provided his only connection to the supporting fire batteries positioned several miles behind the American lines. Each correction he radioed brought the devastating 105mm shells closer to the advancing German formations. The Wehrmacht infantry advanced in textbook formation, using the panzer tanks as mobile shields while maintaining disciplined fire and movement tactics. Their methodical approach reflected the professional competence of veteran soldiers who had fought across multiple European theaters. These were not the desperate conscripts of Germany's final months, but experienced warriors determined to halt the American advance. At approximately 1400 hours, disaster struck the American position with devastating finality. A German tank round scored a direct hit on the M10 tank destroyer, positioned near Murphy's command post. The armored vehicle erupted in a spectacular fireball, forcing its crew to abandon their burning machine and retreat toward the rear positions. The destruction of the tank destroyer represented far more than the loss of a single vehicle. The M10 had provided crucial anti-tank capability and served as the backbone of the American defensive position. Without his 76mm gun, Murphy's remaining forces possessed no effective means of engaging the approaching German armor. As flames engulfed the abandoned tank destroyer, Murphy faced the defining moment of his military career. Standard operating procedure demanded immediate withdrawal. To avoid encirclement by the superior enemy force, his surviving soldiers had already begun their tactical retreat, leaving him alone at the forward position with only his personal weapons and radio equipment. The German infantry pressed forward with increasing confidence. Recognizing that American resistance was collapsing, Wehrmacht squad leaders urged their men onward. Knowing that complete victory lay within their grasp, the sight of the burning American armor undoubtedly boosted German morale while demoralizing any remaining defenders. Murphy's options appeared limited to retreat or certain death. The approaching enemy force outnumbered him by more than 6-1, while German armor provided overwhelming firepower superiority. Rational military thinking suggested immediate withdrawal to preserve his life and maintain command continuity for his scattered company. Instead, Murphy made a decision that defied conventional military logic. Rather than retreating with his men, he chose to remain at his exposed position and continue directing artillery fire against the German advance. This choice would transform him from a competent infantry officer into an American legend whose actions would inspire generations of soldiers. The young lieutenant from Hunt County, Texas, had reached the moment that separates ordinary soldiers from heroes. In the next few minutes, his actions would either result in meaningless death or demonstrate the extraordinary courage that defines the finest traditions of American military service. German tank commanders, observing the apparent collapse of American resistance, began accelerating their advance toward the abandoned positions. They had no way of knowing that one determined soldier remained at his post, prepared to single-handedly challenge their overwhelming superiority through sheer force of will. At devastating, accurate fire, Murphy sprinted across the shell-torn ground toward the blazing M10 tank destroyer, his boots crunching through the blood-stained snow as German machine gun bullets whined overhead. The abandoned vehicle continued burning fiercely, its ammunition cooking off in sporadic explosions that sent metal fragments screaming through the frigid air. The tank destroyer's 50 caliber machine gun remained intact despite the direct hit that had forced the crew to abandon their position. Murphy recognized that the heavy weapon represented his only chance of inflicting meaningful casualties on the advancing German infantry. The belt-fed machine gun could deliver devastating firepower at ranges far exceeding his personal carbine's effective capability. Climbing onto the burning vehicle required extraordinary courage, as the intense heat threatened to ignite his uniform and equipment. Flames licked at the steel hull while smoke billowed from the engine compartment, creating a hellish environment that would have deterred most rational soldiers. Murphy ignored the obvious dangers and positioned himself behind the machine gun's controls. The German advance had closed to within 50 yards of his position when Murphy opened fire with the 50 caliber weapon. The heavy machine gun's distinctive hammering sound echoed across the battlefield as armor-piercing rounds tore into the Wehrmacht formation. German soldiers dove for cover as the devastating fire swept through their ranks with lethal precision. Murphy's marksmanship training proved invaluable as he engaged individual targets. With clinical accuracy, each squeeze of the trigger sent multiple rounds downrange, creating chaos within the German assault formation. Soldiers who had advanced confidently moments earlier now scrambled for whatever cover the frozen terrain could provide. The psychological impact of Murphy's unexpected resistance proved as devastating as the physical casualties he inflicted. German squad leaders had expected to overrun abandoned American positions, but instead faced sustained fire from a determined defender who refused to yield ground. This unexpected development disrupted their carefully coordinated assault plan. Through his field telephone, which remained connected despite the burning tank destroyer, Murphy continued directing artillery strikes against the German armor. His position atop the M10 provided an elevated observation platform that allowed him to spot targets and adjust fire with deadly precision. The combination of his machine gun fire and coordinated artillery created a devastating barrier that halted the German advance. Wehrmacht officers realized they faced an unprecedented situation. A single American soldier had assumed a position that should have been untenable, transforming a burning tank destroyer into a fortress that commanded the entire battlefield. Their overwhelming numerical superiority meant nothing as long as Murphy maintained his deadly accurate fire. The German infantry attempted flanking maneuvers designed to eliminate Murphy's position. Through coordinated small unit tactics, squad-sized elements moved through available cover, Trying to approach the burning tank destroyer from multiple directions, Murphy countered each attempted flanking movement with precise machine gun fire that forced the attackers back to their original positions. As minutes stretched into an hour, Murphy's ammunition supply dwindled while the intense heat from the burning vehicle made his position increasingly untenable. Sweat poured down his face despite the freezing temperature, while the acrid smoke made breathing difficult, yet he maintained his rate of fire, knowing that any pause would allow the Germans to overrun his position. German commanders grew increasingly frustrated as their numerically superior force remained pinned down by a single defender. Radio communications crackled with urgent reports describing the unexpected American resistance that had transformed a certain victory into a costly stalemate. The flames beneath Murphy's boots intensified as the tank destroyer's fuel system succumbed to the inferno consuming the vehicle. Intense heat radiated upward through the steel deck, threatening to cook him alive while he maintained his relentless fire against the German positions. His uniform began smoldering as superheated metal burned through the fabric, yet he refused to abandon his deadly perch. German snipers attempted to eliminate Murphy through precision rifle fire, but the combination of smoke, flames, and his constant movement made him a nearly impossible target. Bullets sparked off the tank destroyer's armor, while others whistled past his head. Missing by mere inches, each near miss reminded him that death could claim him at any moment. The Wehrmacht's frustration mounted as their assault stalled under Murphy's withering fire. Company commanders had expected to overwhelm the American position through coordinated tank and infantry tactics, but one man's extraordinary courage had neutralized their overwhelming numerical advantage. German casualties continued mounting while they remained unable to advance or effectively suppress Murphy's position. Murphy's left leg suddenly erupted in searing pain as shrapnel from an exploding German mortar round tore through his flesh. Blood soaked his trouser leg as the wound throbbed with each heartbeat. But he gritted his teeth and continued operating the machine gun. The injury weakened his stance, while making movement more difficult, yet he maintained his rate of fire without pause. The field telephone crackled with urgent messages from American artillery batteries, requesting target upgrades and ammunition status reports. Murphy provided continuous fire direction despite his deteriorating situation, adjusting coordinates to bring devastating 105mm shells down on German concentrations. His calm, professional voice betrayed no hint of the desperate circumstances he faced. As his ammunition supply dwindled toward empty, Murphy faced the grim reality that his defensive stand was approaching its inevitable conclusion. The 50 caliber machine gun that had held an entire German company at bay would soon fall silent, leaving him defenseless against the overwhelming enemy force. Yet rather than despair, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction knowing he had given everything possible for his country and his men. German tank commanders, recognizing that Murphy's fire was slackening, began maneuvering their panzers closer to his position. The massive steel beasts crawled forward through the snow, their guns trained on the burning tank destroyer. Murphy realized that within minutes, concentrated tank fire would obliterate his position and end his remarkable stand. The ammunition belt feeding Murphy's machine gun finally ran dry with a metallic click that seemed to echo across the battlefield. For the first time in over an hour, the distinctive hammering sound of the 50 caliber weapon fell silent. German soldiers cautiously raised their heads, sensing that their tormentor's deadly fire had finally ceased. Rather than surrender or attempt escape, Murphy reached for his M1 carbine and prepared to continue the fight. With his remaining personal weapons, though wounded and exhausted, his determination remained unshaken. The young Texan, who had climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, would fight to the last round rather than yield ground to the enemy. The sudden silence that followed Murphy's machine gun's final burst created an eerie calm across the battlefield. German and American forces alike seemed to pause, recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. One man's incredible courage had held an entire company at bay, demonstrating the power of individual heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. Historical records from the 3rd Infantry Division archives document the precise details of Murphy's extraordinary stand at Holzwer on this date. The abrupt cessation of machine gun fire emboldened the German infantry to resume their advance toward Murphy's blazing position. Wehrmacht soldiers emerged from their cover positions, moving cautiously across the blood-stained snow while maintaining disciplined formations. Their officers urged them forward, recognizing that the American defenders' resistance had finally weakened. Murphy switched to his M1 carbine as German soldiers closed within effective rifle range of his position. Despite his wounded condition and the deteriorating tactical situation, His marksmanship remained deadly accurate. Each shot found its mark, dropping advancing Wehrmacht soldiers and forcing others to seek cover once again. The burning tank destroyer beneath Murphy's feet had become a furnace that threatened to consume him alive. Metal components glowed cherry red from the intense heat, while ammunition continued cooking off in sporadic explosions. His boots had begun smoking from contact with the superheated steel deck, yet he maintained his firing position despite the unbearable conditions. Through the smoke and flames, Murphy spotted German infantry attempting to flank his position from the left side of the battlefield. He swung his carbine in that direction and engaged the flanking force with rapid, aimed fire that scattered their formation. The Germans dug for whatever cover they could find, their advance momentum broken by his accurate shooting. His field telephone continued operating despite the inferno surrounding his position, allowing him to maintain contact with supporting artillery batteries. Murphy called in danger close-fire missions that brought American shells screaming down within meters of his own location. The proximity of these explosions to his position demonstrated both his tactical skill and desperate circumstances. German tank commanders, frustrated by their infantry's inability to eliminate a single defender, began maneuvering their panzers into direct fire positions. The massive gun swung toward Murphy's location as crews prepared to obliterate the burning tank destroyer with concentrated high explosive rounds. Murphy recognized that his remarkable stand was approaching its inevitable conclusion. As the German tanks prepared to fire, the distinctive whistle of incoming American artillery shells suddenly filled the air. Murphy's final fire mission arrived with devastating accuracy, bracketing the German armor with 105mm explosions that forced the panzers to button up and seek alternative positions. The perfectly timed artillery strike provided him with precious additional minutes of life. Despite his wounds and the hellish conditions atop the burning vehicle, Murphy's resolve remained unbroken. The young soldier, who had grown up during the Great Depression, possessed an inner toughness that enabled him to endure circumstances that would have broken lesser men. Each shot he fired represented his determination to exact the highest possible price for German aggression. The Wehrmacht soldiers, pinned down by Murphy's fire, began displaying signs of demoralization as their assault continued stalling against seemingly impossible resistance. Company commanders struggled to maintain attack momentum while their men remained unable to advance against the deadly accurate fire from the lone American defender. Murphy's carbine ammunition supply dwindled toward empty as he continued engaging targets across the battlefield. Each magazine represented his remaining lifespan, as he possessed no other means of resistance once his personal weapons fell silent. Yet rather than conserve ammunition, he maintained his aggressive rate of fire to inflict maximum casualties on the enemy force. The flames beneath Murphy intensified as the tank destroyer's internal structure began collapsing. From heat damage, steel beams warped and buckled, while remaining fuel supplies ignited in spectacular fireballs. The vehicle had transformed into a death trap that could collapse at any moment, crushing or incinerating its lone occupant. As Murphy prepared to fire his final rounds, the sound of American voices suddenly echoed across the battlefield. From behind the German positions, the distinctive crack of M1 Garand rifles suddenly erupted from the German rear as Murphy's scattered soldiers launched a coordinated counterattack against the Wehrmacht formation. Company B had regrouped during Murphy's heroic stand and returned to support their commander's impossible defense. The sound of American voices shouting battle cries provided Murphy with the first hope he had felt since climbing onto the burning tank destroyer. German squad leaders found themselves caught between Murphy's continuing fire from the front and the unexpected American assault from their rear positions. The Wehrmacht soldiers, who had maintained disciplined formations throughout their attack, now found themselves trapped in a deadly crossfire that threatened to annihilate their entire force. Murphy's remaining carbine rounds found their marks as he continued engaging German soldiers, attempting to establish defensive positions against the American counterattack. His elevated position atop the burning tank destroyer provided an excellent observation platform for directing his men's assault. The combination of his suppressive fire and the ground attack created devastating pressure on the German formation. The psychological impact of Murphy's hour-long stand had demoralized the Wehrmacht infantry beyond their officers' ability to control. Soldiers who had expected an easy victory against retreating Americans instead faced sustained resistance from a defender who refused to yield ground. When the American counterattack commenced, German morale finally collapsed entirely. Wehrmacht soldiers began surrendering in groups as the coordinated American assault overwhelmed their defensive positions. White handkerchiefs and improvised surrender flags appeared throughout the German formation as resistance crumbled under pressure from multiple directions. The sight of enemy soldiers laying down their weapons vindicated Murphy's decision to make his desperate stand. German tank commanders recognized that their infantry support had disintegrated and began withdrawing their panzers from the battlefield. Without infantry protection, the tanks became vulnerable to American bazooka teams and close assault tactics. The retreat of German armor marked the complete failure of their carefully planned counterattack. Murphy's field telephone crackled with reports of German withdrawal across the entire sector. As American forces pressed their advantage, artillery batteries shifted their fires to interdict retreating enemy columns while infantry units pursued the defeated Wehrmacht soldiers. The tactical situation had reversed completely from the desperate circumstances Murphy had faced an hour earlier. As the immediate threat subsided, Murphy attempted to climb down from the burning tank destroyer, but discovered that his wounded leg could no longer support his weight. The combination of his injuries, exhaustion, and heat exposure had weakened him beyond his physical limits. American medics rushed forward to assist their heroic commander as he finally abandoned his blazing fortress. The tank destroyer's ammunition finally exploded in a massive detonation that would have killed Murphy had he remained in position moments longer. The blast sent debris flying across the battlefield, while completely destroying what remained of the vehicle. His timing in abandoning the position had been perfect, demonstrating the same tactical instincts that had enabled his extraordinary defense. Company B soldiers surrounded Murphy with expressions of awe and disbelief as they helped him to safety. These battle-hardened veterans had witnessed many acts of courage during their European campaign, but nothing compared to their commander's single-handed defense. Against overwhelming odds, the young lieutenant from Texas had achieved something that military historians would struggle to categorize. Medical personnel began treating Murphy's shrapnel wounds, while he continued directing his company's pursuit of the retreating German forces. Despite his injuries and exhaustion, he remained focused on tactical responsibilities rather than personal recognition for his actions. This professional dedication impressed his soldiers, even more than his remarkable display of physical courage. The German withdrawal became a complete rout as American forces pressed their unexpected advantage across the entire front. Word of Murphy's extraordinary stance spread rapidly through 3rd Infantry Division headquarters, as field reports detailed the impossible defense that had turned certain defeat into decisive victory. Staff officers struggled to comprehend how a single soldier had held off an entire German company. While wounded and surrounded by flames, the initial report seemed incredible to believe. Murphy's company had suffered minimal casualties during the German assault, thanks to his decision to remain at the forward position and direct their withdrawal. His selfless actions had preserved the lives of dozens of American soldiers who would have been killed or captured if the Wehrmacht attack had succeeded. The tactical results of his heroism extended far beyond personal courage. As Murphy received medical treatment for his wounds, reporters began arriving at the battlefield to document the story that would make him America's most famous soldier. War correspondents interviewed surviving German prisoners who expressed amazement at the resistance they had encountered from a single defender. Their testimony provided independent verification of Murphy's incredible accomplishment. The burning tank destroyer continued smoldering throughout the night. As American engineers worked to clear the battlefield debris, the twisted metal wreckage served as a monument to Murphy's courage, while providing physical evidence of the hellish conditions he had endured during his hour-long defense. Photographers captured images of the destroyed vehicle that would become iconic representations of American heroism. German casualties from the failed assault totaled over 200 killed, wounded, and captured soldiers, while American losses remained minimal due to Murphy's protective fire. The lopsided casualty figures demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of his defensive action and the tactical superiority achieved through individual courage and skill. Murphy's actions at Holzwhr earned him America's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor, along with numerous other awards recognizing his extraordinary valor. The citation accompanying his Medal of Honor would describe his defense as one of the most remarkable individual actions in American military history. However, Murphy himself remained characteristically modest about his achievements. The young soldier's heroism captured the American public's imagination during the final months of World War II, providing inspiration during a period where war weariness had begun affecting home front morale. Newspaper headlines across the United States proclaimed Murphy's story as proof of American fighting spirit and determination to achieve victory over fascist aggression. Military analysts studied Murphy's defense as an example of how individual courage could overcome overwhelming numerical disadvantages under specific tactical conditions. His ability to coordinate artillery fire while engaging enemy infantry demonstrated the importance of combined arms tactics even at the individual soldier level. The action became a case study taught at military academies. Murphy's superiors recognized that his growing fame made him valuable to risk in further combat operations. Army leadership reassigned him to liaison duties that kept him away from frontline fighting while utilizing his celebrity status for morale purposes. This decision likely saved his life during the war's remaining months. The psychological impact of Murphy's stand extended beyond immediate tactical results to influence German military thinking about American fighting capabilities. Wehrmacht commanders had learned that even isolated American soldiers could inflict devastating casualties when properly motivated and supported. This lesson affected German defensive planning throughout the war's final phase. As news of Murphy's heroism reached his hometown of Hunt County, Texas, local residents organized celebrations honoring their most famous son. The young man who had grown up in poverty during the Great Depression had become a symbol of American courage that inspired an entire generation. His story demonstrated how ordinary citizens could achieve extraordinary greatness when circumstances demanded heroic action. Military historians continue studying Murphy's defense at Holzwhr, as documented in official 3rd Infantry Division after-action reports and Medal of Honor citations. The Battle of Holzwhr transformed Audie Murphy from an unknown infantry officer into America's Moss T celebrated war hero. But the young soldier himself struggled with the sudden fame and attention his actions had generated. Despite his remarkable courage under fire, Murphy remained fundamentally modest about his accomplishments and uncomfortable with the public adulation that followed his Medal of Honor award. After the war's end, Murphy's extraordinary military record made him an ideal candidate for Hollywood stardom. During an era when Americans craved heroic figures who embodied their nation's values, his transition from soldier to actor seemed natural, though Murphy always maintained that his greatest role had been serving his country during its time of greatest need. The tactical lessons learned from Murphy's defense became part of American military doctrine, emphasizing the importance of individual initiative and courage in overcoming seemingly impossible odds. Military academies incorporated his story into their curricula as an example of how proper training, determination, and tactical skill could achieve victory even when facing overwhelming enemy superiority. Murphy's Medal of Honor citation became one of the most famous in American military history, inspiring countless soldiers who faced their own moments of crisis in subsequent conflicts. The detailed description of his actions at Holzwhr served as a template for exceptional courage under fire that few soldiers could equal, but all could aspire to emulate. The destroyed tank destroyer at Holzwhr was eventually replaced by a memorial honoring Murphy's courage and the broader American sacrifice. During World War II, French citizens who had witnessed the battle preserved the memory of his heroic action, ensuring that future generations would understand the price of their liberation from Nazi occupation. Military historians continue debating whether Murphy's stand represents the greatest individual action by an American soldier in combat, while other soldiers have earned Medal of Honor recognition for equally courageous acts. Few have achieved such devastating tactical results against overwhelming odds while wounded and surrounded by flames. His defense remains unique in American military annals. The psychological impact of Murphy's heroism extended far beyond the immediate battlefield to influence American self-perception during the post-war era. His story provided proof that individual Americans possessed the courage and determination necessary to confront any threat to their nation's security. This confidence proved invaluable during the emerging Cold War confrontation with Soviet communism. Murphy's later struggles with what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder highlighted the hidden costs of combat heroism that society often overlooked. His willingness to discuss these challenges publicly helped other veterans understand that even the most decorated soldiers could experience psychological wounds that required treatment and understanding. The young man from Hunt County, Texas, who had climbed onto a burning tank destroyer to face impossible odds, became a symbol of American courage that transcended military service to inspire citizens in all walks of life. His example demonstrated that heroism was not reserved for larger-than-life figures, but could emerge from ordinary people when circumstances demanded extraordinary action. Today, Murphy's legacy continues, inspiring new generations of American soldiers who face their own challenges in defending their nation's interests around the world. His story reminds them that individual courage, properly applied, can overcome any obstacle and achieve victory even when success seems impossible. The boy who grew up poor during the Great Depression proved that true heroism comes from within, regardless of one's background or circumstances. Murphy's final words about his military service reflected the humility that characterized his entire life. He had simply done what any American soldier would do when faced with similar circumstances. This modest assessment of his extraordinary courage exemplified the character that made his heroism possible and his legacy enduring. At Holzwer, one American soldier had indeed shocked an entire German company and reminded the world why freedom will always triumph over tyranny when defended by such courage.